Ultimately, when you line things up with user experience, that's when you have a really good, successful result. So this is the same thing with storytelling. Map out the story and just, is the story believable? And you kind of beat it up and you make sure that those things come together. And when all those things align, then, it really is magic. Our thing is not like, hey, everyone needs to make Disneyland. It's not true. I mean, it really is. Everyone just needs to be intentional about their story, what's unique about them.
A pastor turned tech leader and a millennial churchgoer explore the intersection of technology, culture, and faith, equipping you with innovative strategies to support you as you live out your calling, lead your churches with confidence, and step into the future together. This is the Give It Up Podcast.
My goodness, Zoe, another episode of the Give It Up Podcast. And this whole volume has been dedicated, yes, because we've been dedicating this whole volume to inviting our friends, our partners in crime, people within the Flow Fam network to come on and speak innovation, technology, especially as it relates to the faith space. And I couldn't think of a better person for this conversation that we're about to have today than my friend, Peter McGowan. Really quick, I'm gonna give a quick intro. He is one of the founders of Plain Joe and Storyland Studios, champion of bringing clients' unique stories to life by, I love this language, Peter, broadening their visual vocabulary beyond words. That actually has been done through you and your organization at brands like Infiniti, Nissan, IBM, Johnson & Johnson. But what's most exciting to Zoe and people like my wife, Kim, is you've worked with brands like Disney, Universal, and Lego as well, which is super cool. But you're a family man, married to Jennifer, and also have 3 kids, right? Is that right?
Yep. Yeah.
Welcome to the pod, Peter.
Oh, man. Humbled and blessed to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be an exciting conversation because I feel like the church has so much to learn about creating incredible experiences and becoming better storytellers. But before we dig into that, I would love to know, Peter, how on earth does one get into this entire niche industry? And how do you become passionate about creating these kind of experiences?
It starts with that. You have to have some sort of passion to kind of go after it, because there is no kind of, class or major on hey, this is how to, get into experiential storytelling or design or anything like that. And people have followed pathways, going to Cal Arts and stuff like that, and following, the footsteps of certain Disney Imagineers and whatnot. But it's not straightforward. You really have to kind of hunt it down and kind of make it happen for yourself and connecting with people. And for me and my brother, really, it was about friends who kind of, opened up and took us alongside them and taught us what it was to just be, good storytellers, and what it was to kind of put yourself aside and be empathetic with the people who are, on the receiving end.
So when you say broadening visual vocabulary, make that practical for the listeners, because maybe they're not familiar with Storyland Studio and all the work that you've done with some of these clients. But what's some examples of what you guys have done to broaden that visual vocabulary?
Yeah.
What's that work look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's quite simply most people are used to stories being an oral or written tradition, something you read in a book or something that you hear, or even watching a movie, let's say. And watching in a movie and creating film sets or any of those things, that's really scratching the surface of a visual vocabulary of, okay. And it's a spectrum too, because it's not that one's better than the other. In fact, I mean, some of the greatest stories are stories that you read and your mind fills in the gaps. That's why people always say man, the book was better than the movie. It's because their imagination is so charged and actually can be even better, more visceral. But then, when movies came along, it kind of spoon feeds people into things. And what Walt Disney really kind of hooked onto was this idea that, man, people could actually immerse themselves in a story. And that really was the idea of Disneyland and the rides there, was to actually put you kind of in the story itself. But, a mentor friend of mine, Dan Cathy, I think I love what he shares. He actually says in this aspect of service or storytelling, he says that there's hardware and software. The hardware is that physical environment. So, that broadening of the visual vocabulary there. But then there's also the software, and that's the customer service side, the culture, the rituals of the brand. So at Chick-fil-A, it's my pleasure. But how does that software kind of align with that? And that broadened vocabulary really helps the whole story come to life. And there's a whole, like, I can go down a rabbit hole talking about like story and the suspension of disbelief and taking people into that.
Well, that's so interesting because what you're saying here is that you've helped companies like Disney build experiences. Some of that are actual physical structures, right? But if I'm hearing this right, even helping them think through the service layer of how that physical structure interacts with the end consumer. Is that right?
Yeah. And a lot of our work with Disney, just to be transparent, I mean, like a lot of our team comes from, Disney and Pixar and Universal and stuff like that. So a lot of guys worked on things, but then we because of relationships, get pulled into doing things like we were mentioning earlier, we built Hogwarts Express, the train at Universal Studios that everyone takes their picture in front of. And like helping bring those stories kind of to life is pretty exciting, even just to have a small part in this broader thing. So people go like, oh yeah, they created Harry Potter. It's like, no, we didn't write the books, we didn't make the movies, we just worked on creating the physical environments that you walk into at Universal.
Peter, you are far too humble, because the train is like the flagship piece. Right when you walk in, we were just there at Universal last week. Right when you walk in, the first thing that you see is this lifelike train that my daughter, we have been reading Harry Potter to her for the last 3 months to get her ready for this experience. And, religious church folk, don't at me. Okay, yes, I read Harry Potter alongside a couple Bible verses. Sheesh. But she, when she saw that, because her imagination matched up to an immersive experience, it was actually so cool to see.
Yeah, it is pretty remarkable. And actually, I'm a huge fan of JK Rowling and Harry Potter. It really ignited a passion for literature in my kids. And I think it's one of the biggest misses of the church because, the whole boycott and everything was all bogus. I mean, because she was writing it as a Christian allegory. And when she was questioned, like, hey, is this a Christian allegory? She's like, I'm not going to tell you that. It'll give you the ending. You'll know that Harry's going to die and rise from the dead. And, hence a Christian allegory. But they took it as, it's from the devil. And like, the spells are real. It's like, no, it's Latin. She's actually kind of poking fun at a lot of this stuff. But, it's just as much magic and as Lord of the Rings or Chronicles of Narnia or any of those things. But what it really does is it gives you a perspective on this, spiritual world and the physical world, or the Muggle world and the magical world. And it's a great Christian allegory. And I always like, whenever people are like, oh, you let your kids read that? I'm like, yes. And they read C.S. Lewis and they read all, Tolkien and everything. But that's a whole nother conversation we can go down. But humbled, blessed to be a small part of that, man, because it's a pretty magical story, pretty powerful movie. The video game just got launched, the platform, I forgot what it broke record. It was like 800 million in 3 weeks. It was just like, it's staggering. People are so hungry for story, and people are so hungry to connect. And one of the key things in stories, what we call is layers to the story. So it's not just a veneer, it's just not surface. It's when they can dive down deeper into things. And that's one of the great things about Harry Potter is it's so deep.
I want to hear more about this tension of creating what is in people's imagination, even if they aren't able to articulate it until they see it. Like that must feel like a lot of pressure sometimes, because you have to weigh what's in our imagination versus everybody else, and how do we align that? So how do you guys think through matching up what satisfies someone's imagination when it comes to an experience?
Man, that's a great thing. I'm going to back up really quick and just kind of give an analogy of our process and kind of even how we work. I equate it a lot to eating. And it's kind of like what you just said. Everyone knows what good food tastes like, right? You don't have to be a chef to articulate, how it was created. I mean, people have different opinions on whether they like it or not, if it's too spicy or whatever. But usually good food tastes good to, everybody, right? Or to people that are used to it, at least. But the same thing with good design. People recognize it. They can't always articulate, what's good or what's bad. People can't explain why, Disney is better than certain other unnamed theme parks. But it's like, it's the time to actually get to know the reader, understand the story, understand the guest experience, the user journeys, and then making sure that the story makes sense. And that is actually a lot of work, a lot of effort. Steve Jobs, actually one of my favorite quotes from him. He was like in this, I don't know if you've seen that interview. He's like on stage and someone asked a kind of a punchy question about why the iPhone doesn't use certain technology. I think it's like Java or Flash or something. And Steve Jobs basically just kind of points back and says, it's never about the technology. It's never about like whatever flashy thing. It's always about the user experience. You have to start with user experience or start with the story. So in the case of the iPhone, it wasn't about the technology of whatever Flash, whatever Java, whatever keyboard even. It was about the user experience. And the user experience of the iPhone was this narrative of imagining someone taking a call, then making a note or looking up directions or looking up restaurant reservations. And in that narrative, it disclosed to you that the 10 key, the buttons were in the way. And then out of that came the idea that, we have to have a plastic interface, a phone with no buttons. And the reality is once it got launched, everyone was like, this is going to be a flop. No one's asking you for a phone with no buttons. Every marketing survey, everything said that it was going to flop. People not only wanted a 10 key, they wanted a full keyboard, right? And that's why Qualcomm and BlackBerry were always going to dominate. And they just missed it because ultimately when you line things up with user experience, that's when you have a really good, successful result. So this is the same thing with storytelling. You map out the story and just, is the story believable? And you kind of beat it up and you make sure that those things come together. And when all those things align, then, it really is magic.
Wow. When you're discussing like the element of storytelling, blending it with an experience, I'm just curious because I'm thinking through someone who maybe is a church leader is listening to this and they're like, that all makes sense, but it's way more simple with people that come to church. They walk in the door, they get greeted, they walk, they might go to the bathroom, they might get coffee, they sit down, done. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying is there's way more and so many more layers to this. So if you could summarize or kind of give us like a snapshot, what are some elements that are absolutely necessary to create an incredible experience, no matter what type of experience it is?
Yeah. So story always really starts with three core components. What we say is characters, plots, and settings. Understanding the characters of the story, understanding the character of your church. What is it to walk up and shake the hand of your church? Who you are and everything like that. The plot. What are the specific journeys that you want to map out? Because those plots don't happen by accident. And a lot of times people think plot points are just things you check off. I'll loop back to that in a second. It's so much more important. It's like, oh yeah, Vance, it's this whole thing. It's like, do you have giving? Oh yeah, we have giving, check. Forget the fact that the giving process is painful or that young kids think it's totally inane or they're ready to give with Bitcoin and you don't even do that. But in their minds they're thinking, oh, giving, check. It's like, nope, that's it. And that's the third thing is the setting, understanding the environments in which this is all taking place on their phone or physically in person, stuff like that. But going back to the character part, I remember one time I walked up to this church. I went to their website to look up their directions. First off, there was there was the address. I couldn't just click on it, open up Google Maps and navigate to it. I had to copy the address and open it up and do whatever. I pull into the address that's on their website. And it's like, feels like a shopping mall. I look up, I go to what looks like the big main entrance. It has like the big high arch, but there's nothing that says welcome or anything. On their website, it said like a church anyone can come to or everyone's welcome or something like that. But I remember walking up and the big glass doors in big 6-inch letters, do not enter. And it was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But when I got to know the guys, everything, the thought process was some facilities guy was like, hey, these are going to be the entrance doors over here. These are exit doors over here. But rather than putting exit or entrance to the right, or even better, just take the handles off. Just like, instead they put big letters, do not enter. And things like that, it's like when you add too much salt. It's just like, that's like something to right. Because when you're saying, oh, everyone's welcome, but then they're walking up and it's not really feeling welcoming. Wow. But it's so hard for people just to actually take a step back and actually see what their story really is and talk to people who's outside of it. Because so many people in the church are regulars and they know where they're going or whatever it is. But what does it mean to that first time person who's already under a lot of stress and under a lot of pressure or anxiety and all these things? All those subtle little things, like, yeah, it takes them about 3 seconds to realize, oh, those are exit doors. But it's the subtle layers to the story that builds in. Is this really a welcoming place? And I don't know. There's a bunch of movies out there. There's one movie. I'm totally drawing a blank on it was like a whole con man movie, but it was like getting a guy to guess the number, and at the end he goes 21. But throughout the whole movie, they kept putting this number 21, 21, 20 in his mind. He kept seeing it. So when they asked him to pick a number, he goes, "Oh, 21." It's things like that. Those subliminal things actually do matter.
I love that. Oh, it makes a lot of sense, because in our little narrow layer in which we serve the local church and other charitable organizations, we hear things like this a lot, and you kind of referenced it, where, oh, yeah, we accept stock already. And then I go to their website and it says, if you want to donate stock, email cfo@church.org.
Yep.
Nobody wants to email the CFO of the church to give some stock. And it's kind of like, to me, in terms of giving and that slice of which we serve, that's the do not enter sign.
Yep.
Right. And so I love what you're saying. It's kind of like, how do I challenge ourselves as faith leaders, as honestly leaders that are meant to be taking people on an experience and a journey? And how are we paying attention to the subtleties? How are we challenging ourselves to refresh ourselves on, okay, what is a new, Silicon Valley is famous for this, right? Silicon Valley is famous for being really stringent on user testing. In the Silicon Valley, that's built on software primarily. One change to a layout or even one change of a button positioning could equal millions of dollars of revenue for some of these software companies, right? And so there's this discipline in the Silicon Valley of being maniacal about user experiences. What do you think, Peter, is stopping organizations like the local church to actually start caring about that?
Man, I'm going to be sacrilegious here, probably. Yeah,
that's good.
I think it's a stewardship thing, and I think it's a lack of understanding of what Matthew 25 really means, and what is it in the parable of the talents and what we do, and so it's not about saving money. And a lot of people go, "Oh, we're ministry, so we have to save money. We have to be prudent with our dollar." And it's like, man, when I read the parable of the talents, the guy that saved his money, it was better that he had never been born. It was the guy who took the risk, right? And who was not lazy and actually had the higher return on investment that was blessed. And my problem is most churches they're afraid to take risks, and they're afraid to have these great return on investments. I literally have seen churches have success in areas just to shut it down, because I won't say who it was, but we had a church that was doing an online church platform. And we actually, in the early days, we said before Facebook Live, it was like a predecessor to Facebook Live. And as soon as someone would log in, we'd capture all their Facebook information. This is pre-Cambridge Analytica. So we would literally hand back, okay, hey, you had 3,000 viewers this weekend. 1,500 of them logged in. Here are their names, here are their emails, here are their ages. This is how long they stayed on. And we just a treasure trove of data. And the biggest thing is we'd have some churches that would sit there and go, oh my gosh, we have 1,000 people who just gave us their emails with a simple okay click. And would follow up with them. And they actually capitalized on it. We had other churches who literally, they were like, what do I do? Every week I'm getting like hundreds of emails. Am I supposed to follow up with these people? Turn this off. We don't want to do that. And we're like literally, could you imagine if you had hundreds of guests coming, like turning in a visitor card, and you're like, stop taking visitor cards. It's like, it's too much work for us. And it's just like, it's just the thought process is so dysfunctioned because they're so focused on key performance indicators versus, objectives and key results. And I use the analogy of driving. It's like they're so focused on, hey, do we have gas in the car? Are you driving the speed limit? You're not speeding, right? Are you making complete stops? Because we don't want to get a ticket. They're so focused on those things, they're missing the whole point of where are you going? Like, what is the GPS setting? And they're driving in circles around the mall. And they're just going like, hey, roll the windows down. Make sure people know we're excited. Yeah, we're all... And they're not getting on the freeway. They're not heading north and going on the road trip. The whole journey is getting missed because they're just driving in circles. And but hey, they're not running out of gas. They're hitting all the stop signs. They're not getting the speeding tickets, and they're all happy with that. And we just like, man, yeah. And the whole thing about Silicon Valley and the lessons that we learn there is, it's not a one and done. It is an iterative process.
Yes.
It's constantly, there's 10,000 versions of Facebook out right now, and they're constantly testing and iterating and figuring out. But we have people bring us on all the time, and they think it's, oh yeah, we hired them, we're done. And it's just like, man, it's like cleaning your garage. I mean, yeah, I know a lot of people that only ever clean their garage once. It is like, man, if you have kids, man, garages are like magnets, and they just gather things. And it's a constant effort to keep your garage clean. And that's the truth. Is it's a constant effort to make sure your story is on track and true. And as any story, it's an iterative process. You have to keep re-editing it and sharpening it. And is it relevant, and how are things progressing? But does that matter? Am I totally off the subject?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you just heard the last 5 minutes, that is worth the price of admission. I know you didn't pay anything to listen to this podcast, but I will say, Zoe, my mind is blown.
No, man.
I legit just got chills listening to that concept. And I think what's so important about what you just said is it's an iterative process, because this is really a sentence I've been chewing on lately, is results never last. Like, I can't think of one thing other than death where there's actually a permanence to a result. Like, you have to keep fighting to continue getting a result. And not only is that like an area of growth for the church, but I kind of want to ask you your thoughts on churches who have tried stepping into creating immersive experiences. I'm not even going to get into online church as much as examples I've seen over the past decade of some churches doing in the kids area, kind of creating like storefront situations to create that more magical area for them. Is that a good example of creating an experience, or where is the church still falling short?
Yeah, a couple things about that. So first off, and this is a good friend, Roberta Amundsen, is actually writing a book on kind of art and architecture and the influence on religion in those things.
Wow.
But man, she really opened my mind to this whole thing of just when you talk about church history, when you talk about like the original churches that were built in Europe, and the abbeys and the monasteries. Have you ever traveled through Europe? Have you guys been to any of the old cathedrals?
For sure.
Italy, especially.
Oh, incredible.
They were
Vatican,
not built for worship on a Sunday morning. They were actually built as experiences. They were experiential locations. They were built as embassies of the new city of Jerusalem. They were built for pilgrims who were making their journeys back to, Israel, and they were set up along these pilgrimage routes, whatever, and so that people could come into them and actually have experiences with God. And the way that they were lined up was that usually certain ones were facing east, so that over the altar on Easter Sunday, the sun would rise through that stained glass window. You'd usually enter on the north side. The north side would then have like all the chapels that were set up with all the stories of the fall of man, because the north side was the darker side, the colder side. You'd go around the altar and the Passion of the Christ and redemption, and then you go exit out of the south side, which was the side with all the sun and the warmth, and those were all the stories of redemption and all the stories of hope. But people would actually come into the early churches for experiences, for holy experience, and that's why people gathered around them, and that's why the cities grew around them. And it's just but they started off as experiential places, all around the story of redemption, which I just love it. It's so much a part of it, but it's about experiencing God. So when churches are kind of going back, and really for 2,000 years, I believe, I believe Jesus came to this earth as a storyteller. I mean, yes, he was a teacher, he was a healer, but man, he wasn't just a teacher on the steps of the temple. He was a teacher along the way that actually used story to connect the scriptural truths. He didn't just teach from the scriptures. He used story to teach the parables, to relate and connect. When he healed somebody, it wasn't like go to church on Sunday now. It was now go share your story, or even better, go show your story, right? So, storytelling is really how the church led for 2,000 years. And you look at all these different mediums and the embracing of technology to help tell story. I don't think it's an accident that Jesus didn't write the New Testament. The only time he ever wrote anything down was temporary in sand. And that was because the limit of the technology, it wasn't about it. I mean, and I've read things about this before, about how the finger, he was probably writing the eighth commandment or whatever, is because his finger is the finger that wrote the 10 Commandments. Ooh, all these things, whatever. But just like the 10 Commandments that were written in the stone, and then that became the ark, and they held it in such high regard. I think Jesus intentionally, he was educated. He could have wrote the New Testament. He could have carved it into stone, but he didn't, because at the time, the best way to convey story was an oral tradition. And that's how he equipped the disciples. And that's why they didn't write things down until like years after he left, because the best way was an oral tradition. But they would use the technology of the Roman roads. And then as you fast forward in time, whether it was the printing press or radio or television, the church has always used technology to get the gospel out. But it really wasn't until after the Industrial Revolution and this idea of this assembly line approach to things that the current church model really took shape, where you have a building that's used one day a week. I mean, that is such bad stewardship. I mean, to have a building used one day a week. Disney, a lot of people say Disney's extravagant, they spend all this money, but they use these facilities, 7 days a week. And, even Chick-fil-A is at least 6 days a week. It's like, but they really kind of, 1 day a week, really? That's it? And you have this great facility, you're kind of putting things through. I love that churches are trying to be intentional about, creating these environments that engage kids, because they're being engaged, whether it's at Disneyland or whether it's at, all these different places that they go, they're being engaged. And really right now in the digital world. My issue is when that story doesn't relate to who they are. And it's like, when we talk to them about it, and it's like, oh no, it says this bigger church did this and this bigger church did that. And they're just copying what they think other churches do rather than embracing their own local story. And whenever we look at really successful churches, it's hard not to get around the personality of the senior leadership.
Right.
And then the stories that kind of revolve around them and how things kind of dovetail and come to shape with that. And that's all. Our thing is not like, hey, everyone needs to make Disneyland. It's not true. I mean, it really is. Everyone just needs to be intentional about their story and what's unique about them, because story is what gets passed on from one generation to the next. When we talk about story, I mean, it is core to the human condition. It is how culture is conveyed from one generation to the next. And right now, the biggest disconnect is the story that's being conveyed to the next generation is not being the people who are being intentional about it are the people that we're complaining about. And this is like, they're better at telling story.
So interesting. I mean, we're gonna get supercharged in elevating this conversation even further into tectonic platform shifts that we're starting to see, and how that might impact story, right? So what I'm talking about is AI and the metaverse, right? Obviously, with AI, some of the narrative right now is that creatives such as animators are starting to become displaced because some of the tools that AI can now do, can replace 10 animators with just, a couple prompts type of situation. Obviously, Peter, you're closer to this than most people. I would love to hear your take on that. But also, I'd love to hear your take on the metaverse as well. These platform shifts that we might be facing, I mean, the verdict's still out. We're still in the midst of it. But if these truly are platform shifts, is this going to enhance creativity? If so, how? If not, what's your skepticism around it?
Yeah. So, I mean, really the core of just understanding what is creativity, and the idea that it's more than just divergent thinking. It's divergent thinking of ideas with value, and how do you actually enhance life and stuff. And I think you meant illustrators, not animators. But
probably, yeah.
We're on the forefront of AI trying to replace animation, and there are a bunch of different things, and there's a bunch of levels to it that we're looking at. But the reality is we've been immersed in AI for decades. I mean, really, that's one of the key things why Google is successful, is because they were using machine learning to come up with better algorithms. We've been totally indoctrinated into it, and Google has actually had some of this stuff out for years. They were actually holding back. Things just really blew up when this practical sense of ChatGPT came out and exposed really what's coming out. Now, the reality is the church has not embraced AI, because we've worked with churches before, and literally something as simple as having a website that to a first-time visitor would welcome a first-time visitor. And then if they came back, just a session cookie to recognize and say, welcome back. Like literally, and we'd get pushback from people going like, oh, there's privacy stuff or whatever it is. Like, we just need an online brochure. And it's like, you guys be kidding me. It's like the idea that you want to track somebody and say like, oh, they were on your website looking up like divorce care or looking up junior high. The next time they come back, maybe we should put like, hey, there's a divorce class, or here's information about junior hires on there. And the idea that we get pushback from that from customers is like bizarre, but churches would push back on that because of different reasons. Because a lot of us, they don't want to make an investment in something when they could get a website for free or for $99 or for $2,000. Just not understanding like what machine learning was really the benefits of it and different results. But when we talk about metaverse as well, I mean, for us, it's kind of a foregone conclusion. And a lot of people, I guess, they don't realize this, but when we talk about video games, when we talk about like Minecraft, Roblox, Fortnite, I mean, these immersive worlds really is the content that will be first on the metaverse and the metaverse platform. These people are not pining to get 2-3 hours of people's times a month. They're in the dozens to hundreds of hours.
Wow.
And it's like the film industry, people think, oh, it's about film. That's the thing. The video game industry is estimated 10 times the size of the film industry. It's at least 4 times, if not 6 times. But the video game industry, it is where the next generation is. It's where they're engaging. And the idea that there's going to be hardware that will catch up, that allow the extension of that to happen, is all we're waiting for. So it's the same thing of like, you had movies. You've had movies for, decades now, right? When you took, from the film to VHS to DVD to streaming, it's like, that's just the platforms that it's coming out on. The metaverse is kind of there as far as the content, the story. It's just a platform. Is it going to be on the Oculus headsets? I can pretty much guarantee you not. Is it going to be on, because those are just too big and bulky. But yeah, right now though, our illustrators, our animators on our team, who literally, we work with guys who are just like the best in the world. I mean, from Pixar and Disney and stuff like that. It's just a tool. AI, Mid-Journey, all these things. It's just helping them in the creative process. But really, AI is almost a reflection of what already exists. Truly new, innovative ideas, it's not good at coming up with, at least yet. But the collaborative process and how do you bring things to life that are actually of value to people, that's the creative process I think that God created us for. I mean, our God is the God of creativity. And I think when we look at innovation, all these things, that is the death nail for the assembly line process of things. No assembly line goes unpunished from innovation. And that's really where the church is at. If it doesn't innovate, it's going to become irrelevant. And that's what, the way of the automotive industry, telecom industry, railroad industry, steel industry, like, it doesn't matter. You have to innovate.
Wow.
Does it make sense? I don't know. Am I totally off track? I'm sorry.
No,
you are blowing our
perfect.
minds.
No.
Yes. So with quite a call to action like that, let's get granular. What is one thing, just a springboard, that you would love to see every church implement immediately to get better at creating an experience?
Oh man, take stock of what their story is. What is their story? The characters, plots, and settings, and be intentional about it. Because a lot of times people think it's values, it's this, it's that, whatever. It's like, and if you can't sit down and document what your story is, like, it's the stories of that first time visitor coming to your church. And like, we literally go through and say, okay, pick a random target audience. It's a single mom. She's in a grocery store. She's struggling. She just had a miscarriage. Some crisis just happened. She's going to go to her phone. She's going to look it up. What is it that she sees on her phone? Oh, one church main locations. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean to her? But what is the first thing that you would say to her? Hey, we care. A church that cares. How do you find us? Okay, she gets into her car. She's going to drive there this Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. She's going to meet you there. Like, okay, so when they get into their car, like, what is it when she pulls up? What is it that she sees when she gets out of her car? When she walks in through those front doors? Like, literally, what is the story? Because her having a great experience can be kind of a random happenstance of just happy things coming together for her. And I think that's how some people believe the earth was created, all this randomness. Or it can be an intelligent design of sitting back and saying, hey, for that story, this is how it's going to unfold. We want her to walk in. We want her to see that, hey, this is clearly where the kids go. This is where the restrooms are. And this is where you get coffee. And then or whatever those things. But I don't know if that makes sense. But
oh, man, I am chuckling inside. Understanding her story and going to a website that literally like probably half of churches have right now. One church, many locations. What does that even mean? That is so eye-opening. And this conversation, Peter, every time I get to speak with you and get to learn from you, I get so energized because, Zoe and I are part of a company that in the giving space at the very least right now are trying to push the bounds of what's possible. Right. And, in some cases, we do feel that we're pioneering some things. And you can always tell a pioneer by the arrows on their back, right? And so in some cases, we do feel like we're pioneering some things, but it's so gratifying when there are certain churches, partners, early adopters that see it, that understand the story, that understand the next generation that's coming up, that have a very specific story of how they think about money, how they think about generosity, and even more than that, how they think about their discipleship journey, right? And they start seeing the big picture of, cool, like, because we understand those stories, this is the fuel that we need to be intentional. And really, I love how you talk about things from a first principle standpoint, because you're almost agnostic to the technology, right? There's always going to be platform shifts. There's always going to be new technology. There's always going to be new tools and things that we can leverage. But at the end of the day, from oral tradition to metaverse tradition, the underlying facts about all of that is that those that understand their story, are authentic to it, and are able to tell it the best are the ones that captivate society. So I love that. What a great combo. Thank you so much, Peter.
Yes,
Man,
thank you,
no,
Peter.
totally. Humbled us to have the conversation with you guys, man. And we'll have to hang out soon at Disneyland. It'll be fun.
Let's go.
Absolutely. Well, we'll start planning out some hangouts. Zoe, any last words from you?
No, I mean, this has been a challenging conversation just for me, because when you're talking about experiences, you're not just like, oh my gosh, that was so fun. This is like all 5 senses are being overloaded and transported to a different world. And if the church can captivate people like Jesus did, like the gospel does, and we can turn it into an experience like that, then we can transport people to a taste of what heaven looks like and feels like. And I think that is so beautiful and so convicting. And I'm pumped right now. I'm hyped up by this conversation. So thank you.
Hey, give it up, podcast listeners. Give it up for Peter McGowan. Shout out to Storyland, your team, everything that you guys are pioneering. We appreciate you.
Oh, man. Thank you so much for having me.